Shabbat Shalom. How is everyone this Shabbat morning, this beautiful morning? It was really nice this morning. Some of that good fall weather that we are having. So praise y'all for that, man. Well, here we sit. We have made a complete circle. We've made a complete round the mountain. And but hopefully, when we come back around, that we're not in that same rut, that we have stepped a little bit higher, and we're on a upward spiral and not just going around and around and around. I know that that every year that we see new things that we didn't see before and make new connections and these types of things. And so hope that that your experience has been that in your walk, that as you go through the scriptures and particularly the Torah, that you find all of these connections that lead you into a deeper walk with the Father and better understanding of really what's being said in the New Testament, because we can look at the foundation and see where that these people were coming from, what their foundation was, and what they were building on that foundation. And that's what Paul says. He says, the foundation has been laid, and that we are to build on that foundation, not to go out and try to build a new foundation or to change that foundation, but to build upon the foundation. And that foundation, of course, is Yeshua himself, because he is the cornerstone of our building that we're building. And if he's not the cornerstone, then we're liable to wind up with a building that's not quite square, and it might not be able to stand the test of time or the winds of all kinds of doctrine and these type of things that blow upon that building. So we want to find ourselves in a earthquake-proof foundation building. So to begin that building, we always want to begin at the beginning, right? So that beginning is in the beginning, Breisheet. That's what Breisheet means, is in the beginning. So if we go back to the beginning, then we can understand as it goes along more of why that it was those things took place and so forth. So the Genesis 1 is the beginning, and we're going to read a few verses in Genesis 1, and then we're going to discuss a few things that we see there. And by no means are we going to get everything that's in Breisheet itself. Just the word itself, we could spend probably a couple all day on just the word, but we're not going to go quite that extent, and maybe that's some things that we can discuss further in our roundtable. So, Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters." So in the very first verse here, we see some very important things that we need to be aware of, because how it comes along in just the chapters that we're going to read. These are definitions of things and words that we need to look at. The very first one is darkness. Everything was created out of darkness. That's when the world was come into existence. It says without form, and it was void. In other words, didn't have anything on it. And he says the darkness was upon the face of the deep, and that the Spirit moved upon the face of the waters. Okay. And we know that Spirit is the Spirit of the Father himself, breathing into the life on this earth. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. So that's one of the very first acts that we see him doing. And we have to question, well, what is this light? Where did this light come from? Because seemingly it hadn't said anything about the sun, those types of things. So what is this light? Interesting that back during the Apollo time, that when America first started sending spaceships up and so on and so forth, even landing on the moon, whether you believe that or not, but anyway. But one of the things that was commented on and talked about was that as they got out into space and they looked back upon the earth itself, that it had its own light. And I thought that was pretty interesting, because that light was not in existence at first, but then it became light. So when you begin to wonder, well, what was that light? Does the earth glow, or what is that light? So we're going to read a few things and see if we can determine what that light was. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So we have some real rules being set, laws being set here from the very, very first. Darkness, then there was light, the division of that light from darkness to lightness. And the evening and morning were the first day. So we see that the day begins in darkness, right? Evening in the darkness. It's called in the Hebrew that's how it's called. It means it's a mixture part. That's the definition in the Hebrew. So, and Elohim said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And Elohim made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. In other words, he took the water and divided it and surrounded the earth with it. And the Elohim called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. So this pattern continues on. He's setting a pattern of what the definition of a day is. First darkness and then light, evening and then morning. So these are things that we need to look at and to put into our mind as set laws of basically of nature, that God is setting forth these laws here that no man can actually change. Okay? So we're going to look at this light. We're going to look into the New Testament and see if we can find the definition of this light. This is in John 8:12. Then spoke Yeshua again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. So we're beginning to see now what this light really was that he brought out of darkness and separated. It says, He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. It says, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. I am come a light into the world, that whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. This then is the message which we have heard of him, declared unto you, that Elohim is light, and in him is no darkness at all. So it's always interesting to look. It's always, he takes the physical, the natural or the physical first, and puts the spiritual with it or after it. So, so then we begin to understand where this light came from in the first days of the creation of this earth. It was his light, because we're going to see that he is the one that created all of these things. Yeah. Genesis 1:9. And Elohim said, Let the waters and the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herbs yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So it continues, this whole routine of darkness and light, darkness of light, evening, morning being a day, the definition of a day. And you might think, well, that's pretty easy to see. But interesting enough, there are people that don't believe that that's the way the creation was, and that the morning is what sets the day and not the evening. So it's interesting that we go back to the beginning and look what he put down, laws of nature that we cannot change. No one can change. We may want to interpret it a different way, but we cannot change the actual physical thing that is taking place every evening and every morning. But we see, though, that man wants to get totally away from God, call ourselves the creator, basically, and then we created our own world, so to speak. So we're going to look at a few other things. As evening and the morning were the third day. We're going to look at, if so, this light that was created, and Yeshua himself is that light, he says. So he was that light to come into existence. The first day, second day, 3 days. Now it's been 3 days that the earth was lit by his light. So then we're going to see maybe some things, how that this has to do with things later on in the stream of time and lifetime. This is in John 4, 9-14. It says, then said the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that thou, being a Jew, hast drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. And Yeshua answered and said unto her, if thou knew the gift of Elohim, and who it was that says to thee, give me to drink, thou would have asked of him, and he would have given thee living waters. So he's talking about that he divided the waters from the earth. Okay. The woman said unto her, sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us this well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? Yeshua answered and said unto her, whosoever drinks of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinks of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. So we know from a very human standpoint that we can't live very long without water. Probably 2 or 3 days, probably at the most, that you could live without any water at all. So, but he's talking about a physical water with a spiritual application. So, harking right back to creation. Says, and we read in John 7, the thing that we saw here last Monday. In the last day, that great day of the feast of Sukkot, Yeshua stood and cried, saying, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture has said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Said he spoke also of the Spirit. So we're making all these connections of things later, some nearly 4,000 years after creation, when the Messiah arrived upon the scene, once again in his physical standing, and short right back to creation. Matthew 20, verse 17. Yeshua, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples apart in the way and said unto them, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death. and shall deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge and to execute him, and the third day he shall rise again. So this third day was living water. The very first day was light. So we see the Messiah pictured two different things, light and water. So actually the very essence of life. Without those two things, you couldn't live. But he connects it, the third day shall rise again. Okay? Likewise, also the chief priests mocking said among themselves with the scribes, he saved others, himself he cannot save. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, descend now from the stake, that we may see and believe. And they that were executed with him reviled him. And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, 3 hours. Once again, directly pointing back to creation. I am the creator. Here's the things that that will point you to who I am. Okay? The third day of resurrection, the 3 hours of darkness, going back to the darkness upon the face of the deep in creation. The very essence of light, the light of the world is Messiah. He is the water also of the world. So we make these connections where we can really show people that Yeshua was in creation and he doesn't change his creation. These things were fulfillment of things that he did from the very creation of the world. So we're going to go back now to Genesis 1. We're going to look at verse 14 through 19. It says, and Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Well, I thought that's what we had before. Now he says these are lights in the firmament. In other words, in the heavens, that we can actually see. The other was his light, remember? So he says, let your lights be in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Okay? And let them be for signs and for seasons. We look at a little bit into these words here, and we find the meanings is more than just day and night and 4 seasons of the year, these types of things. Because the seasons, the word seasons is 4150, and it means moed, appointed times, or for days and years. Okay? So we see that these firmaments, lights in the firmament, were set there to rule the seasons of the moeds, of the set-apart days. And how it does that is with the 2 lights of the sun and of the moon. This is God's calendar that he put in the firmament of the heavens that that cannot be changed, cannot be monkeyed with by man, because they're still there as a witness. Once again, though, what is man doing with it? He's twisting it, interpreting in the wrong ways, and saying, oh, that has nothing to do with anything any longer. We're going to make our own calendar. We're going to make our own day and night, and so on and so forth. It's always been from the get-go, it's always been the rebellious spirit that's in man that causes this to take place. It says, let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, which of course is the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Well, see, that's an interesting part of the calendar that's really been messed with and really have been thought of as, what do they call it? It's the zodiac, but the the interpretation of those signs within the zodiac is being used for non-religious purposes. It wasn't intended for that. It was intended to also help mark the times of the years, plus also the months and occasions that take place. So when you really look at at the zodiac, do you see these signs there? You really start looking at the names of the stars and these types of things. It's the very story of redemption, of salvation, that's painted within the stars. And so that's why he says that it was part of. He said he made the stars also, because we see that these things that are shown at the times of the years that they are points out also God's feast days. We see the ram being the sacrifice around Passover time. We see the scales that are in Libra. We just saw the period of time that we were in at Sukkot was the Libra was showing the balance of scales, because in the Day of Atonement is the day of balancing our records, right? So that's why God made all of these and put them in the sky at times to show that we're at the right time of the year, the right times for these moads, and it really gives you the real meaning of these days. So, and Elohim set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So we learned several things right here, that this is God's calendar in the sky that he placed in the week of creation, the very week of creation. He didn't wait until do it some other time or tell Moses or whoever, this is this and this is this. Put it there where that every individual can see it for themselves. So there's a couple of things that we can take from this as we see that we come to see that the moon rules the night, but it also sets the time of the month. Okay? So how can we really tell when a new month is, but only by a new moon? Okay? So there's a lot of controversy, or some controversy, over what constitutes a new moon. Okay? If we're looking at creation, just take creation itself. On the fourth day, the sun and the moon being created on the same day, then what would be the position of the sun and the moon? If they're created on the same day, they're created together. Okay? So there would be, and also what is the first part of the day is darkness, right? Everything started in darkness, and everything continues to be starting in darkness. Every day that we wake up is already started in darkness. When we wake in the morning, the day is already started in darkness. Okay? So if the moon is to rule that darkness, then it's going to rule actually the counting of how many that moon goes through its phases and back to it again. And it seems to me that if it's in darkness, it would be a new moon of darkness. I know that in Judaism they use a fingernail moon, and that's not always true either in Judaism. That new moon is moved around some to accommodate some of the things that they've added to the calendar and changed on the calendar. So sometimes it's even a dark moon that they call a new moon sometimes. But then sometimes it's like 2 or 3 days after the dark moon. So these are some of the things that we want to look at from a biblical standpoint, not just from anybody and everybody, out there. And because we find ourselves in the midst of a bunch of different calendars, and it's been that way for very long periods of time. It's been that way even in the time that Yeshua was here on this earth. There were several calendars in existence at that time. But see, there are some of the things that we want to follow the moads, the appointed days, and these appointed days are set by the sun and the moon. Then we need to look at where they begin. If there is a calendar that's being made out there and doesn't take into existence this right here in creation, then it's not a correct calendar, because that's where the calendar existed from the very beginning, was on the fourth day of creation, when he created the sun and the moon and the stars and set them as signs in the heavens for all of his feast days and all these types of things. So these are some of the things that we want to look at when we begin to look at calendars and begin to want to follow God's feast days and these types of things. We want to be as accurate as we can be. And we know that is some of the things that's really come to fruition here lately, is that we have all kinds of calendars, even calendars that were existence prior to Yeshua's time, being found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and these types of things. But if those calendars do not line up with creation, then how can they be right? Then they would have to be just something that somebody has figured out, calculated mathematically or whatever it might be. But it has to be this right here, because that was the creation of the calendar, starting of it. He set it in motion. So those are some of the things that I wanted to point out to us, and each one of us is responsible for our own studies on these types of things. I can point these things out, but do some research and more studying on them, and you'll, particularly as you find in the zodiac and these type of things, that there is a vast amount of learning right there in and itself. It's just another avenue of proof that how the calendar operates and how it works. And so we know that these things have been in existence, like I say, since creation, and we see that that's what the Magi was looking at, was the sky, when they saw the signs of the Messiah's coming and his birth. They got it. They didn't get it from somebody else. They got it by looking at the stars and saying, we see his star. So want to just point those things out as we go forth from here, that these are the basis that we must look at and study to determine. Once again, we always want to go back to the Scriptures. What's the Scriptures say? Does it? Do they support? Are they supported by the Scriptures? Our belief system and our things that we have come to put into doctrine, or whatever that you want to call it. So I just wanted to show you a couple of little things. This is not near in-depth studying of any calendar or even creation calendar. I just want to point out a few things that you would look at when you're studying the calendars. It says we know that the creation calendar is based on 3 astronomical phenomena. The rotation of the earth on its axis makes 1 day. The revolution of the moon around the earth makes a month. And the revolution of the earth around the sun a year. These 3 phenomena are independent of each other. So there is no direct correlation between them. On average, the moon revolves around the earth in about 29.5 days. The earth revolves around the sun in about 365.25 days. That is about 12.4 lunar months. Okay. So, but when you begin to study then the calendar, and we'll see it as we go further in the Torah portion, particularly when we get to the Torah portion of Noah, that we'll see that prior to the flood, that all the months were 30 days long, and the year was 360 days long. So it made it very easy to follow and have a calendar. But we see because of sin, God destroyed the earth with a flood. And when he did, it changed the orbits of these earth and sun and moon. Because the big thing was that the envelope of the earth, where he said he divided the waters, put it over the earth, and those that are on the earth. But when we read the account of the flood, we see that the fountains of the deep were broke, but it also the water that was above came down. We are no longer enveloped with a deal of water. So sheer weight would cause some of it. The other is if you remove that covering over the earth and it doesn't change this, it's going to be probably too hot to inhabit the earth. So all of those things work together to change the orbits of these. So we're now that it takes 365 and a quarter days for the earth to go around the sun because it's moved it out a little bit. And the same thing with the moon. It's 29 and a half days. So then when in God's calendar from the very beginning we just read in chapter there, verse on the fourth day, that I'm sorry, that everything was created equally together all on the same day. Okay. So that would mean that the beginning of the month, the beginning of the year, and so forth would have all started on the same time period, same day. Okay? So those things, because of sin, has caused a real problem in trying to follow God's calendar. Because now your year is 5 and a quarter days longer. Your months are 11 days shorter than the solar year, and so puts it out of sync. So that's why that most calendars that you see today are only solar calendars, only based upon the sun itself and not the moon. There's only basically 2 calendars that's really left that uses solar and lunar together. One is the Jewish calendar and the other is of Islam. They also look at the lunar also. All right, so the Gregorian calendar used by most of the world has abandoned any correlation between the moon cycles and the month. So if you look at a Gregorian calendar, and it even sometimes, a lot of them will show a new moon, and it's not at the first day of the month, it's just wherever it is falling, So they got away totally of starting the month with a new moon. So they arbitrarily set the lengths of the moons to 28 days, 29 days, 30 days, or 31 days. Okay, that's a Gregorian calendar. And I'm sure that you probably maybe have studied a little bit about the Gregorian calendar. There's a pope in the 1500s that changed the calendar from a Julian calendar to a Gregorian calendar. Actually, he was a pope, but he didn't actually do the work himself. There was an Italian astronomer. He was an astronomer, a doctor, and what is it? Anyway, pretty evidently a pretty intelligent man. And he began to look at the Julian calendar and saw that it was incorrect also, and that it had gained too many days, basically, by about, I think, 11 days. So the Pope took it in and instituted it, and but it wasn't until the 1700s that America actually adopted the Gregorian calendar. For the main reason is that it was a Catholic calendar. And actually, if you look it up, most of the places will tell you that it's an ecclesiastical calendar. Ecclesiastical means church. So it was actually a church calendar. In other words, where he could put all of Catholicism's days of worship on this calendar. And that's what he did. Like Christmas and Easter and Halloween and all of these other days. It's how they come into existence onto a calendar, because it was a church calendar. But we're also looking at the Jewish calendar. We also look at it. It says in the 4th century A.D., Heli II established a fixed Jewish calendar based on mathematical and astronomical calculations. Before, it was based upon the actual sighting of the moon. And it was, of course, they looked for the fingernail moon. And yet also that can vary considerably, depending on where you're at, what the weather's like, and so on and so forth. So when Heli said, well, it would probably be better if we established a calendar that was based on mathematical and astronomical calculations. And so set to do that. And so the Jewish calendar that you see today, that's how it's regulated, which is fine. But then the problem is that they went and added a whole bunch of laws that rules when the new moon can fall in a certain month, because it also regulates when the feasts are. They started making all of these types of rules that atonement can never fall on a Friday or a Sunday. Other days also cannot fall certain days, because they would have 2 Shabbats back to back and so on and so forth. There's a whole list of them. Some of them are listed in creation calendar. So, but we know, looking at the calendar in the scriptures, there's no place for any of that. It says on certain day, on the 1st day of this month, on the 14th day of this month, and so on and so forth, regardless of what day of the year, what day was the day arrived on, whether it was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever. So, but there was some other things that he did that's pretty good. The calendar still is in use. It standardized the length of months and the addition of months over the course of a 19-year cycle, so that the lunar calendar realigns with the solar years, because that's what you have a problem with, because your lunar years is, like I say, 11 days shorter than the solar year. So to put it back to creation, because those being created on the same day in creation, and before the flood, they always were together on the same day. So he figured out a 19-year cycle, okay? And what that entails is what time and how often that there is a intercalculated month added to the calendar to make them have 13 months. If you don't do that, then pretty soon your Passover and whatever is not going to be in the spring like the Bible says for it to be. So it's a thing that has to be done. Just have to make sure that it's done at the proper time. So the current cycle that actually just ended and started was in the Jewish year 5758, and that was in October the 2nd, 1997. That went to 2016. So at the beginning of 2016 started another 19-year cycle, and during that cycle it shows that on the 3rd year and on the 6th year would be a lunar month added to it. It was called Abib 2. Says the Jewish calendar, this is another interesting fact, the Jewish calendar has the date for creation as 3761, okay? And they have also the date today as the year of 5782. Okay? So, according to them, you're still about 200 and some odd years away from the year of 6,000. We feel like, and most people do that work in astronomy and these types of things, that 6,000 years is lined up with the 6 days of creation. Okay, a day for 1,000 years, and that's what the Bible points out. So their calculation of time is about 200 so years different than the Gregorian calendar has creation set at 4,001. Okay, so it's interesting to look at these things to really get an idea of what's going on and where we need to be and so forth. I know a lot of people say, why does it really matter? You know, a lot of people follow the Jewish calendar and say, well, if they're wrong, it's their fault, it's not mine. But we all know that we have to make our own calling sure, right? By studying, by working these things and making our calling and election is sure. So these are some of the things that we can talk more about if you like, round table or whatever, and maybe get a better idea of where we need to be. So we're going to move on from that subject on to this is the other part I wanted to add to this, because this is something that comes up a lot in Exodus 12. Okay, Exodus 12:1 says, "And Yahweh spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." Okay. "Speaking unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of his souls. Every man according to his eating shall make you account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, the male of the first year. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats, and they shall keep it up until the 14th day of the 7th month, same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings. It is Yahweh's Passover." Okay. Some people think that God changed the beginning of the year right here. I don't see how or why that he would. To me, this is more of 400 years of living in a culture that didn't follow God's laws and had lost those things that their ancestor Abraham and Jacob had taught them. And I think this is a bringing back, is a saying, hey, I'm going to set you back on God's time. You've been on Egyptian time now for 400 years, okay? And there's even a discrepancy there. The Jews believed that they were only in captivity for a little over 200 years, that the 430 years goes back to Abraham's time and the binding of Isaac. So those are interesting things, and they're just side notes, but this particular thing right here, a lot of people, and even among Jewish scholars, they say that this was the restart beginning, that originally that the year started in the fall of the year, and that he moved it around to the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the year around to in the spring. But the reason we can say more definitely that that's not the way it was, when we once again go back to the week of creation. What happened in the creation after the sun and the moon was created? He says he also created all of the plants and animals, and he said the grasses, and they begin to grow. So when would they be growing? As we see in our world, is those things take place in the springtime, not in the fall. If the earth was created in the fall, it would be created a dying world. Because we know that there was those types of seasons even back then. And that's why, even Solomon says, as long as there is the stars, the moon, and all these, there will be winter and summer and spring and all these types of things. So, so we can more depend then that the beginning of the year in creation began in spring, okay? Because even in the scriptures, this first month is named Abib, meaning green ears. In other words, that there's the barley's in the green ears. They have just begun to ripen, And if you've seen wheat, it has an ear on it, and then it begins to ripen and blossom out. So, so we can prove from creation. That's why Creation Week is so important to understand and to follow, because everything is there. It says in two different places, the end is in the beginning. And that's for everything, not just prophecy. That is for everything, because that's the thing where he set and started from, So that would be like changing your birthday to some other time of the year and calling it your birthday over here. No, you'd have to go back to when you were created, right? So, so I think that's something that you might want to look at and study a little bit. Says that this is the beginning of the months unto you, the first month of the year to you. So in other words, he was just bringing them back to God's time. He's saying this: y'all wandered too long, or long enough, into Egypt, and he said, I've showed you, I've destroyed all their gods, and now I'm the true God, and I'm going to restore the days, and also restore the law. So that was, he took them to the Mount Sinai and restored the law to them. So, because we know that the law of existence from the very creation foundation, because just in the story of Cain and Abel, we see, okay, that they were bringing forth sacrifices for sin, okay? So there had to be a law to have sin, to break that law to be sin. So these are just some of the things I'm trying to point out to you and maybe prick your interest of trying to study a little bit deeper into these types of things. Okay, I'm going to go on. I'm going to actually skip over to, this really shows you. I'll just go ahead and read it. This is in Genesis 1:20 through 25. It says, so let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that hath light, and fowl that may fly above the earth, and open firmament. And Elohim created great whales and living creatures that moves in the waters forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl. And Elohim blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply on the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures after his kind, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth after his kind. It was so. And Elohim made the beasts of the earth, and all the cattle, and everything that creepeth on the earth, and Elohim saw that it was good. All these words mean good and everything. In other words, complete. That's really the word in Hebrew, means complete. It doesn't have to be added to or changed because it's complete. That's why he said good. When you look that word up in the Hebrew, it says complete. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, after their likeness, our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and every creeping thing creeps on the earth. So Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he him. Male and female created he them. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and every living creature that moves upon the earth. And Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb and bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat or for food. So we see in the original creation time that man existed in a vegetarian type diet. Only those things that lived, the fruit trees, the herbs, all of those types of things was for his meat. So once again, some of these things, because of sin, have come a change. So going on to Genesis 1:30, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything creep on the earth wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. So we even see that the animal kingdom lived a vegetarian diet. There was no carnivorous animals in the original creation. There was no tigers and things that ate other animals. They ate what grew, the grass and these types of things. And even today, some of those still exist. The cow was made to live on grass, not any other thing else but grass. But we're feeding them a lot of other things, even taking chickens and feeding them more chickens. It says, and Elohim saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening morning were the sixth day. In other words, they're complete. We have not to have to do anything to them, change them or whatever. They are complete. They're made like I want them to be made. It says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And of course, on the seventh day, Elohim ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. Look up the word sanctify. It means to set it apart, for it to be holy, something that he made for us to rest within, a set apart day for mankind. Because that in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim created and made. And these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens. So didn't need no help, don't need any man going and biologically changing and making hogs grow an ear for human, or take a hog heart and put it in a human, or didn't need any of that kind of stuff. He said, I've done made everything perfect like it's supposed to be, and please keep it that way. Yeah. So all we see is mankind want to be God, play gods, So even to the worst thing now that we see is we're gonna change who you are. You're not really a boy. You might be a girl, or you could be a toaster. But jury's out. It says, I guess we're getting pretty close to time. I guess there's a couple of things we might want to bring out right here. It says, one of the questions we might want to ask is, where is Yeshua in creation? That might be a good question. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. Elohim, and the word is bar, means create. While El is the singular form of God, the I am ending of Elohim indicates plurality. Okay? This does not mean that there are many gods creating the earth, but it does indicate that the nature of God involves a plurality, as well as unity. Those two words you need to look at, because that's the very thing that we say in the Shema, right? That's what the Shema is really about, is that our God is together in unity, okay? One reason we know this is because even though Elohim is plural, the Hebrew verb barar, which is created, is singular. If more than one person was involved in the act of creation, the verb would be plural, baro, and not bara. But we're going to look at those things. However, in Genesis 1:22 to 3:22, the identity of this one person is clearly a plurality of some kind. Let us make man, Adam, in our image, after our likeness. The man is now become like one of us. Who is in this us? Okay. In the first verses of Genesis, we see Elohim as creator, and the spirit Ruach of God is hovering, breathing upon the waters. But where is Yeshua? The Apostle John tells us that Yeshua was not only with God, but he accomplished his work as the Word of God himself. Okay? So in the beginning, Breisheet was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God in unity. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Yeshua knew exactly what to create and how to design everything because he is the exact imprint of God's nature. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Hebrews 1:3. Who being the brightness of his splendor and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the majesty on high. Wow. By his word, upholding all things by the word of his power. Wow. So, that person that the world wants to get rid of, if they did, this world would go away. If you really think about that, it's pretty important that his word still stands, or we're not going to have a firm foundation to stand upon. So, those are powerful words. Says the good news is that we are created in the image of Yeshua, who is one in Elohim. So the words we speak have power also. Wow. The bad news is that we often abuse that power. We seem to instinctively know that when we speak dark, destructive words, we may bring into existence the very things we hate or fear. For the thing which I fear comes on me, that which I am afraid comes to me. Job 3:25. So why do so many believers not speak forth the light of Yahweh's truth in order to bring forth his light into their lives? Let there be light, true, and freedom. And Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light. Genesis 1:3. You're made in the image of Elohim, and your words have power. When we align our speech with Elohim's word, we bring light into our lives and those around us. On the other hand, speaking darkness and evil toward ourselves or others is a form of a curse. But Elohim gives us a way to break the curse and free us from this sin. If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, Yeshua said. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:31. If we truly abide in the words of Yeshua, then we will naturally speak forth the light of Elohim. Only his light will free us from the darkness of our self-imposed curses. So it goes on. It talks about Cain and Abel. It's interesting. Here, I just want to maybe just a couple of things. It says, resentment, bitterness, and jealousy towards the acceptance that God gave Abel festered in Cain's heart. However, in God's great love toward his creation, he gave Cain the opportunity to think differently about the situation. The Lord said to Cain, why are you so angry? And why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? In other words, you know what's right and wrong. And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desires is for you, but you must master it. How many times we find ourselves in this same place? Satan loved to have us. Although Elohim rejected Cain's sacrifice, he gave Cain real hope that the next time he would be accepted if only he changed his thinking and behavior. Instead of following Elohim's direction, Cain chose to let his shortcomings master him. The anger and the jealousy, festering in his heart, transformed into a plot of revenge and self-sabotage. Cain killed the very person he most wanted to become, basically himself. A man in good standing with Elohim. Although God allowed Cain to marry and have children and live a long life, he would have to toil hard to harvest the ground for food, and maybe even live with a lifelong guilt of killing his brother. Unfortunately, Cain's sin didn't stop with him. 5 generations later, a man wounded Cain's descendant Lamech. Lamech killed him without remorse. Lamech's son, Tubal-Cain, became a man who made all kinds of bronze and iron tools, which some scholars believe were used as weapons of war. This is in our Torah portion. However, Lamech also bore Noah, who would obey God and save mankind. Of course, that'll be in our next Torah portion. So, hopefully that you've received some blessings by being here this morning, being part of the starting of a cycle of learning, not a cycle of drudgery and, oh man, here comes all these laws and everything, but a cycle of love, not only for God but for our fellow man. So Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Thank you for watching a teaching from Emet HaTorah. If you are ever in the Odessa area, we would love to welcome you to our Shabbat service, 11 a.m. every Sabbath. For more information or for more teachings, feel free to find us on the web, www.emethatorohodessa.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook. Thank you. God bless you and your family. Shalom.